Christian media is not only surviving, it's thriving and helping to change lives. Welcome to Freedom Alive. More than 60% of American adults use Christian media in some form, whether it's on TV, radio, podcast, news websites, social media, or YouTube. People are looking for encouragement and hope. Troy Miller is president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, an international association of Christian communicators united to spread the gospel through every electronic medium available. And we're honored that Troy joins us on this program. And I am blessed to be joined again by Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel, our co-host. And Matt, that 60% likely includes Christians and those who are not yet Christ followers. It's a reminder that God uses what we do, even on Freedom Alive, especially on Freedom Alive, and along with all other Christian media, to change lives for eternity.
Steve, that's very exciting, and especially for this program, because this program goes all throughout the United States and some parts of the world.
Internationally.
And then here in Central Florida, where we're located, we have all the world coming to Central Florida with all the different theme parks in Central Florida. So instead of having to take the gospel to all the world actually comes to Central Florida. And some of these people are in their hotel rooms as they're visiting from all around the world, people of faith, people of no faith, people from various kinds of Middle Eastern countries as well, with different religions. And when they're there in the evening or in the morning during the day, they turn on the TV, they flip through the TV, and there's the station, and here's this program. So it's an amazing opportunity that we have in today's modern society with the technology that we have to be able to communicate the gospel in ways that were just simply unprecedented and unforeseen just a few generations ago.
Amen. It is going to be a great program. We cannot wait to bring Troy Miller to you. But our Freedom Alert, brought to you by Liberty Counsel, is next.
Christian photographer wins free speech lawsuit against New York. The state of New York awarded wedding photographer Emily Carpenter attorney's fees after she sued because of a state law which violated her religious beliefs. In 2021, Emily sued in federal court to challenge the constitutionality of the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. That 2002 law would force her to provide the same photography services to same-sex couples as heterosexual couples. Emily could have faced fines, jail time, and losing her business. She also could not voice her religious position on same-sex relationships on her website. The appeals court returned the case back to the lower court, considering the Supreme Court's 303 creative designer victory. The lower court ruled that the law violated the Supreme Court ruling. The government can't force Americans to say things they don't believe.
Up next, Matt's interview with Troy Miller.
It's my privilege to welcome to our program Troy Miller, who is the president and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters. Welcome to Freedom Alive, Troy.
It's great to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Troy, for our viewers' sake that may not be familiar with NRB as much as we are, can you explain what NRB does and why it's so important to broadcasting Christian messages? And as they're traveling, on the road and listening in their car, listening to a Christian station, they might not be thinking of NRB or watching this program, but NRB is critically important to the communication of Christian media.
Yeah, so NRB has been around for 81 years now. We started back in 1944 when radio was emerging as the top mass media sort of way to communicate. There were a group of pastors who wanted to be on radio. And back then, even then, Matt, there were gatekeepers who wanted to decide who could and who couldn't be on. A group got together, formed NRB at Moody Church, and for the last 81 years, we advocate, we work on the rights for any Christian communicators to be in that public space. So whether you're a television or radio broadcaster, or today you're a blogger or a podcaster or a YouTuber, NRB is the association out there that's fighting for your rights to be in the public sector.
Well, an NRB just recently commissioned a study with the Barna Group called The State of Christian Media. And some of the findings from that study were frankly amazing to us. Can you share some of the findings about Christian media?
Yeah, I think the thing right off the bat, Matt, we did this back in the late fall of last year, and we wanted to know the effectiveness that Christian media was having in the public sector. And right off the bat, the number that really jumped out was that 60% of the general population, that's general population, not just Christians, the population across the country, tune into some form of Christian media on a regular basis. And that number was pretty spectacular.
That's astounding, 60%. I know when we were preparing for this program, we were going over some of those numbers, and it was amazing to us. So 60%, that's a large number. And some of those people that are listening are not necessarily Christians or believers. They come from different faiths or no faith at all. Many are Christians of different denominations and faith beliefs, but this is a great opportunity for Christian communication to be able to reach the masses.
And it shows the importance that Christian communications holds in the public sector, to know that that large of a section of the population is tuning in to listen to this and actively searching it out, Matt. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about that study as well is we asked what the number one reason was why you tuned in, and it was hope and encouragement. People were looking for hope and encouragement, and that tells us a lot about what's going on in the rest of the culture as far as mass communications is concerned.
Yeah, or anything else that you found interesting that you want to share with the viewers? Hope and encouragement is obviously a great insight, because so much of the other media is depressing. It's pushing anti-family, anti-faith values. They're looking for something good and clean and hopeful.
Yeah, and two other numbers that really popped out, Matt, was I think most people would think if you ask them just generically who listens to or tunes into Christian media, they would tell you it's an older generation. It's probably the baby boomers, the X Gen, but that wasn't the case. The two top groups that tuned into Christian media were the Gen Zers at number one at 67%, tuning into some form of Christian media, mainly in the social media space, and the millennials, the Gen Y, at 50, I think it was 54% tuning in. And so those two younger generations tuning in, that really shows a lot of hope out there, I think.
You know, Troy, that's encouraging. I would not have anticipated that kind of a result without this particular study. It's very encouraging. It's like going to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. It's so encouraging because the majority of people you see there are young people. It's a new generation that's wanting hope and seeking our Lord Jesus Christ. We want to talk about something else, and it's about AM radio. I know NRB is involved in this, and we take AM, FM for granted, but why the significance of AM? What's going on with AM with some of the car manufacturers and others wanting to remove AM radio opportunities from the radio signal in your cars?
Yeah, Matt, this actually started a few years back with AM radio in electric vehicles. And so there were a few foreign manufacturers that stopped including AM radio in the electric vehicles, and it had to do with a supposed issue between the interference between the AM signal and the electric gear inside those cars. But then what happened 2 years ago was the American manufacturers kind of said, okay, we're not going to include it in our new electric vehicles, and then turned around about 6 months later and said, we're not going to include it in our combustion engine cars as well. And so when we got into the weeds of this to figure out what was going on, the real issue is a thing called the connected dash. And auto manufacturers today are building, interactive cars. They have these dashes in them, and they really want to sell the subscription service in the dash to your car. So you get a subscription to get to internet, you get a subscription to get to the various apps you want on there. And we sort of looked at this and said, well, AM radio really is just the first step to, limit consumers' choice and drive them to have to subscribe in the car. So we came out with worked with a number of organizations now, what's called the AM in Every Vehicle Act, to keep AM radio in there because it's vital. 80 million people listen to AM radio. Christian talk and teach, number one genre, conservative talk behind that, sports talk, and then Spanish language talk there. So we just see a real problem here with another gatekeeper controlling information, especially in the vehicle.
So it started off where they said the AM interferes with some kind of electrical component. That was the original excuse. But then what you found is it's more than just an electrical component issue.
Yeah, electrical component fix. I have a Navy engineering background. Electrical component fix, the government accounting office, it was $35, Matt. We know in relation to a $10, $20, $30, $40,000 car, that's insignificant. So that's what got us looking into the bigger issue.
And so they want to literally move out AM, and then the next one would be after that FM. So when you get in your car, you have no radio opportunities unless you do a paid prescription. And I guess the car manufacturer and others, they may get some cut of the money that comes in from those subscriptions.
Well, according to documents from the auto manufacturers will sell those directly. But Matt, the real thing behind it is the information they're going to gather on you. Like today, the real revenue is in how much they can sell about you and your buying habits and your listening habits in there. And look, we didn't think it was prudent. The government, when they created radio and they created all of the regulations, had this idea that communications served a public interest. And we already know the issues we have with all of the social media companies being gatekeepers. Now we're going to throw the auto manufacturers in there who want to make money off of your data, being another gatekeeper into your access to information.
So President Donald Trump said when he was at the NRB, International Christian Media Convention, he was welcomed at NRB to speak there, and he pledged at the time, quote, "I will do my part to protect AM radio in our cars," close quote. You're working with, I'm sure, the administration, other areas of Congress, and other areas of influence to try to stop this attempt to remove AM from the radio stations?
That's right. The AM in Every Vehicle Act is already cleared the Senate. Senator Cruz sponsored it there. It's cleared the Senate committee. So it's sitting in the Senate waiting for House action. Right now, it's the most bipartisan bill, I think, that's in Congress. We have 261 at last count, 261 sponsors, and that's almost equal across the aisle between Republicans and Democrats. So we're hoping when Congress comes out of their recess in September that this bill is either going to get taken up directly in the next markup, or it'll get taken up as part of one of the appropriations bills that'll be reviewed in September and October.
And that's the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. That currently is S315. That's the Senate version. So that would require the Secretary of Transportation to issue a rule requiring access to AM broadcast stations in motor vehicles. And so when they come back from their recess and they continue with their deliberations, can people contact their senators as well as their members of the House to encourage them to support S315, which is the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act?
Yes, and we would encourage you to do that, to just reach out to your state representatives, in particular on the House side. Again, the Senate side has broad bipartisan support on it on both bills. We just need the leadership to understand this bill is important. We realize they had the big, beautiful bill, spending bill they were working on, and they'll have appropriations bills coming up. But this is 2 years running. We need this one to just get over the finish line. So please call your congressmen, call your senators, and ask them to support this bill in the next round of processing for the House.
Well, we all lived through COVID, and we saw, as you mentioned, some of the social media and some of the search engines that censored information that people were even sharing personal stories during COVID about different things that were happening to them, reaching out for different kinds of alternative medical treatment. Lots of information was censored. The last thing we need is to go through another mass censorship and have the motor vehicle manufacturers, because of money, that want to track us and profit off of data for gathering all the information on what we do and our habits, to then censor out AM radio, because as you mentioned, AM radio top programming is conservative talk, Christian talk and teaching, Spanish and sports. Those are some of the things that would just simply vanish when you're in your car. I listen to AM radio when I'm driving periodically to find out what's going on with some of the news programs or some of the talk programs that are very informative.
Well, yeah, and Matt, you're one of the, as I said, 80 million plus people that listen to AM radio on a regular basis. And so, there's a lot of talk you'll hear from the car companies, oh, this is an outdated medium, an outdated way. That's not true at all. AM radio is still thriving, and it's thriving in those genres. They're recently, even the George Soros group bought up a bunch of AM radio. Now, I don't think they're going to buy up AM radio if they think this is a dead medium. And so it's very important for this to continue forward and people to have that free choice.
Well, Troy, I think that what you just pointed out about George Soros, where he wanted to basically corner the market, if you will, and buy up a bunch of AM radio stations. And on those radio stations that he has been attempting to buy, and thank God we have a president that's now in office and some new members on the FCC that may be able to say something about that situation. But had he been successful, or if he is successful, that would mean a lot of the conservative talk show hosts would be eliminated because they're on AM. A lot of Christian broadcasting and messaging and preaching and other talk Christian programs would be eliminated as well. So you can see this effort, whether it's from George Soros or from some of the auto manufacturers, targeting AM radio. And it's because it's become so successful, particularly within Christian conservative markets.
That's right. Rush Limbaugh made AM radio the place to be if you want to listen to, conservative talk and of course, Christian talk and teach. And look, we know in rural communities, it's still the number one medium that people get their information, because it's the number one way that information is transmitted. A lot of the other FM stations are music oriented, where AM radio is more informational in its context. And so, yeah, this is an important bill to fight for, to just continue to have consumers have that free choice of what they want to listen to, and not always have to subscribe, or even have their subscriptions limited to what they can even subscribe to by auto manufacturers.
So again, that bill, for those that are watching, to take action, you can contact your United States Senator, contact both of them, contact members of the House. And normally, if you have one senator that's not necessarily responsive, respond to them, contact them, because this is a bipartisan issue. Everyone should agree that we ought to have access to AM radio. So contact both your senators and your members of your House in your area. And it is the AM radio for Every Vehicle Act, and it's S315, Senate Bill 315. Ask them to support that, because that is critically important. I want to move on to another topic, Troy, and that is the so-called Johnson Amendment. It's been around since 1954. And NRB, National Religious Broadcasters, and others, but NRB is very instrumental in bringing litigation in 2024 against the IRS regarding this particular piece of legislation that entered into the IRS Code in 1954. Tell us about that and why it's so important what you're doing to try to overturn that restriction.
So thanks, Matt. A little history on the amendment itself. So Lyndon B. Johnson was running for Senate in Texas. So during his Senate campaign in Texas, he was opposed by a number of organizations. Some of those were churches, and actually they were minority churches who considered him to be a little racist. So he won the Senate seat anyway. The next year, when the appropriations bills were moving through, he attached this amendment to it. It's called the Johnson Amendment, has his name, and it has 3 restrictions to it. So it said that nonprofit entities, which all churches in this country fall under, as well as what's known as a 501c3 organizations, are prohibited from 3 things. They can't financially donate to campaigns. They can't oppose or endorse candidates for office, and they are limited in the amount of lobbying that they can do. So those were the three things that Johnson put into this. So the second one there, that oppose and endorse candidates, is the one that we are concerned that we brought the litigation to. Again, so think about it. For 175 plus years, pastors in this country shepherded their congregations by telling them about the people and about the issues that were important to the governance of this country. And that's what it's really about, the governance of this country. And pastors were able to do that. They did it in sermons. They did it from their pulpits. And then Johnson comes along and says, no, you can't do that anymore. And so that's where this lawsuit came. That's the history behind this. We think pastors have that right from the pulpit. They have a biblical conscience as shepherds to speak the truth in God's word, and the government shouldn't be the ones controlling that.
It's interesting that Johnson's election, when he ran the first time in the Democratic primary, is basically a tie. And when the polls closed, magically, these ballots appeared in ballot box 13. They're all alphabetical order. They're all written in the same handwriting. And lo and behold, now this essentially tied Democratic primary, Johnson wins, I think, by about 87 votes. And now we know that that particular election, from people who were part of it, was a stolen election. So now he gets into office, and he gets opposed later by some nonprofit organizations and churches because of his racist tendencies. So from the very beginning, this has been an effort to censor and throttle pastors and churches and nonprofit organizations.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. That was the intention of this. And look, Matt, it's had a chilling effect. Since 1958. Pastors have been worried about their churches losing that nonprofit status. And just to be clear for that doesn't mean churches are protected under the First Amendment as entities that don't pay taxes themselves. But what it would change for them is the donations given to the church wouldn't be tax deductible by the parishioners. And of course, that would worry a number of churches, and they don't want to go south of that. But here's the other thing, Matt. Over the years, the IRS has applied this very one-sided. Yeah. It's always been Christian church or conservative pastors and conservative churches that have gotten the letters, the cease and desist letters from the IRS. Whereas Democratic candidates, even when they're endorsed from the pulpits, those churches haven't received so much as an email or a notice from the IRS. So the unequal application of this rule as well has been an issue.
Yeah, even when Obama, Hillary Clinton, or Joe Biden goes to speak at a church and they're literally endorsed there in the pulpit, the IRS has said nothing to those churches. But if you have
Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
Kamala Harris was endorsed by senators.
Yeah, exactly. So really, it's been applied only to one viewpoint, only to one particular group, people who support candidates that are Democratic. It hasn't been applied. People that have supported some other Republican or conservative candidates, then they threaten, you better shut up, you better stop, because otherwise you'll lose your tax-exempt status. And if you are not getting a letter from the IRS, you're getting a letter from other groups like the atheist group, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. They just want pastors to be quiet. So thank you for your leadership in taking this lawsuit here. I think it's so critically important what you're doing because, some people, Troy, they may say, well, politics should stay out of the pulpit. And I actually saw someone talking about that. Well, the fact of the matter is, should we not all agree, whether you think that politics should be in the pulpit or not in the pulpit, should we not all agree that the government has no right to tell a pastor what can be preached from the pulpit?
That's correct. That's absolutely right. Look, we're not saying that every pastor has to talk about politics from the pulpit. This is up to the pastor's personal conscience between them and God, how they're shepherding and serving their church. And the government should not have a right to get in the middle of that. They should not be in the middle of a pastor's conscience of doing his religious duties, his job before God's eyes. And there's no room for the government. I think that's what our founding fathers understood in the First Amendment when they talked about them.
Any final words you want to leave with our viewers?
Well, look, Matt, we live in the greatest age of communication today. Everybody carries a device around. They can be a Christian communicator. So if you want to track all that we're doing, you can go to nrb.org and track all the different things that we're working on, or you can follow us on social media. All of our links are there. And we're just excited about the time that God has with the gospel today. And so we're going to keep fighting for Christians' rights to be in that public space.
Well, go to nrb.org. That's nrb.org. Troy, thank you. And thank you to the National Religious Broadcaster for all you're doing for Christian media, not only in the United States, but around the world.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, this program hits close to home at Good Life 45 and at Freedom Alive. As you know, we are so committed to sharing truth with every episode and every word. And I think it's really fantastic for those watching this program to see that there are many alternatives, Christian media alternatives that are doing just that and pushing back against this mainstream media model that is increasingly sowing fear, sowing doubt, lying, really. I think it's a fantastic message for us to be able to bring.
It really is. It's astonishing that he has these statistics. About 60% of people get their information from Christian media of some source. Mm-hmm. And that all of these listeners are a high demographic are the young people, which is amazing. Most people wouldn't have thought that that would be true, but they're getting it from different sources, maybe Christian media through, say, social media, but that's where they're getting their sources. And the reason why is because they want hope. Mm-hmm. And Christian media provides that opportunity. So this particular program, it's aired throughout the United States. It's also aired on NRB TV, and it's aired throughout parts of the world. So it brings hope. You've always said that's why we're here, to bring hope. And that's mm-hmm. what we do. And amazing, that's what the survey said. So we certainly appreciate, your viewing this program, but also telling other people about this program, Freedom Alive. It's really quite unique. It's mm-hmm. unlike many other Christian programming that you see. It provides a wide variety of information for Christian viewers and for others as well.
It is an awesome thing to be in the hope, peace, light, and truth business together, and it's so obvious why it's necessary. I mean, there's just so much that we have to push back against. So I just want to say thank you. It is a joy and a delight to be able to team up with Liberty Counsel in this way. In closing, remember 1 Corinthians 13, verse 6, which says, "Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. Join us here next time. You'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.